Bonjour, bienvenue au French Tech Podcast. Welcome to the French Tech Podcast, recording here at Singapore's FinTech Festival, the #1 FinTech festival in Asia, I think. Very welcome, Steve Cohen from Basis Technology. Can I ask you to get started, just quickly introduce yourself and say a little bit about your company?
So my name is Steve Cohen, and I am a co-founder and chief operating officer of Basis Technology. We are a text analytics and cybersecurity company. Text analytics is the big part of our business, based in Boston, Massachusetts. And we create the technology that analyzes textual information produced by people and makes it possible for computers to do something useful with it, where that something is pretty broad. There's lots of different use cases.
Well, that's really interesting, right? Because people are always talking about big data, about analyzing stuff that's out there on the cloud or on the internet, and your technology is part of what makes that possible. So if there's text anywhere on the internet, you make it possible for machines to understand it and to act on it, correct?
Yeah, make it possible for organizations to build software to do something intelligent with it, or we hope it's intelligent.
So what's the kind of stuff that's being done through the use of your technology?
So one of the most basic set of capabilities is just to make it easier to find information. So a lot of the search technology that's out there uses things that we've produced or other companies like that in order to make it easier to find information in many languages more quickly and more accurately. You know, when you have so many documents, you can think of web pages and web search, but it also applies to enterprise search. Even small enterprises may have millions of documents, Word documents, Google Docs. Just finding that information is actually pretty hard.
Right.
And we help make that easier.
Finding it and making sense of it.
And so finding it is the first step. Making sense of it is the process of figuring out what information is contained within those documents.
Right.
And that's, again, where text analytics comes in and can extract and find information. That information can range from something as simple as figuring out what language the various regions in the document are written in, all the way up through finding, say, the names of important things contained within the document. Those things could be the names of the people or the places or organizations, and tagging those and saying, this document has reference to these people and these organizations. And then another level up from that is to try to figure out how they relate. There may be a sentence that says that John Smith is the boss of Mary Jones.
Right.
And we can figure out that information and allow you to construct, say, a graph, a knowledge graph, and understand the relationship. And that's something that a computer can then be used for decision making.
So it's really a multitude of possible applications.
Quite a few. A few.
Is there any particular application that you think, do you find very interesting, that you're sort of proud of that people are doing that with your technology?
Well, I will say that there's a lot of national security organizations inside the U.S. and overseas that are using our technology in a variety of ways, and that we have been involved in. I can't really talk about them in general, but we have been involved in some useful interdictions and usefully finding bad guys. That's the technical term. We just call them bad guys.
Well, that's tech for good, right?
Exactly. But another one, since you asked that question, another one is we spend a lot of time doing something that sounds really straightforward and simple, which is matching names.
Oh.
You have a person's name.
Yeah.
And this is one of the messiest bits of information that you can encounter on a daily basis. Now, I'll give you an example. How many different ways do you know how to write the name Smith?
Oh, right.
Right? At least a couple. Right? Now, how many different names have you seen in English the name Muhammad written? Right? Not picking on any language or anything like that.
Yeah.
When you transliterate it or you translate it from one language to another, it gets really messy. So it sounds really easy to say we're going to build a computer program that's going to compare two names to each other. It turns out to be really hard. And we've been working on that, including some U.S. federal funding a few years back, for about 15 years.
Wow.
And that technology is used in a couple of countries, including the U.S., for at the border control, and a lot in the financial services sector.
Oh, I see.
For compliance screening.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Wow, it's very interesting. And very interesting contrasting uses of your technology to solve sort of different verticals, but the same kinds of underlying problems, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we do quite a bit of our business in the national security space, and what we found was in the finance space, the problems look the same.
Right. The parameters are different.
The parameters. The use cases are a little bit different. The parameters are different. In finance, they don't like to get what we refer to as false positives, which is
Right.
incorrectly identifying the candidate that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And they're more tolerant of that in national security because they hate false negatives.
Right.
I.e., you don't want to let a bad guy slip through the borders.
Exactly. Very interesting. So you're doing this work out of Boston, is where
That's
you're
right,
based,
yeah.
right? I understand from what you're saying that you have clients everywhere, that you're a global company now.
Yeah.
And today we're recording this here in Singapore, Southeast Asia, the biggest FinTech conference of the region. What are your impressions so far?
This is an impressively large conference. There's a lot of interesting innovation in fintech, and so my impression overall is that it looks to me, seeing where these companies are and what they're doing, that the financial innovation is very, very strong outside of the traditional finance centers.
Right.
Right, and so what we're seeing is, I don't know if it's a democratization or just the dispersion of financial technology, but there's a lot of innovation everywhere in the world, which is really good for the world at large and maybe not so good for some of the existing centers and experts in finance.
Well, it's clear that, and that's really one of the things that struck me here moving to the region as well, that innovation can happen anywhere.
Yes.
And that people in places where you don't expect them to be are making great things happen.
Yeah, and that's to me that's pretty evident just looking around the floor here.
Yeah. Is that a bit of an eye-opener for you? Is this the first time for you here in Singapore?
Yes, it is. I guess I kind of expected it, but even as much as I expected it, I'm still wowed at just how much activity and variety.
Right.
It's both of those together.
Is this something that you would suggest to entrepreneurs outside of Asia to at least once come and visit the region and see what's going on here, see how vibrant the community is?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I've been involved in Asia, broadly speaking, for a long time, and have been to Japan many times in particular.
Right, yeah.
This is my first time in Singapore, but I'm a big advocate for spending time outside of your home base, wherever that is. And largely I speak to Americans on this because they tend to be the
Right.
ones least likely to think they need to bother going outside,
Right.
but it applies to everyone. To get outside your home base and get a sense for things like I just said, for the fact that there's a lot of innovation happening in many other places.
Well, and also, like you mentioned, I think competition these days is becoming global.
Yes.
So you need to get a sense of that competition, where it's happening, where it's coming from, and what kind of parameters are in play there.
Yeah. And the other thing that I've learned, not just here in the last day or so, but just sort of a lot of other reading, is the extent to which the countries and the locales that were kind of furthest behind or not on the forefront of finance are leapfrogging, right? They're taking advantage of a disruptive opportunity to go past. And that's evident in things like micropayments and the use of the blockchain. I think we're seeing that everywhere outside of the established financial centers. So there's actually going to be a lot of catch-up. And I'm sure the major finance players are paying attention, but it's going to be really hard when you have so much innovation from people who have nothing else to do than to move forward.
Well, and so I'm representing a French Tech here, so a global network of French entrepreneurs out of France, Europe. And I think it's always interesting. This should inform us in our sense of urgency, our sense of competition, right? And it's really hard to grasp if you're not here on the ground, if you haven't visited the region.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And I think just one trip, or just take one plane to China, visit a couple of one of these booming cities, right? Just get a sense of all the energy and all the opportunity, and that will really get you moving, I find.
And get reestablish a sense of where you are in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for taking the time to talk to us today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And I hope you really have a great time here at the FinTech Festival.
Thanks. Good so far.